Doing great. How are you doing?
Well, every day, Planet Chaos continues to spin out of control. But the past week, there's been a lot of action in the financial markets here and globally. And who better than to explain what is going on to the audience and myself than you? So I don't know if you want to. The audience knows you by now, but if you want to just talk about, what you're looking at and what's going on from your vantage point.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think you're absolutely right. The planet chaos keeps spinning, and they're throwing stuff at us, through the fire hose, and stuff, slips through the cracks. It's like, oh, an assassination attempt, a new presidential candidate, okay, a mini stock market crash. There's a Bitcoin bill that we probably can get into today that's got some really nefarious stuff going on with it, involving the U.S. gold stockpile. So there's so much stuff going on. Especially in the financial markets. That's kind of my forte.
Yep.
So, if we want to start there, we can talk a little bit about my view on it, my take, and what it means, what might be heading our way. Yeah, there's like 6 stories that would be leading stories any day of the week that just are getting, muffled right now. But this is something a lot of people probably have heard at least a little bit about, right? What's been happening in the markets. And for anybody that listens to it, they probably heard stuff about Japan and the connection to Japan. And there is a very strong tie to Japan. So this really kicked off. It didn't kick off, Friday or Thursday. It kicked off in the middle of July, which, depending on how you look at things, was right around the time of the Trump assassination attempt. Right after that failed attempt, really, was when you started seeing in the charts the Japanese yen gaining strength against the U.S. dollar. Now, normally this is not a big deal, but what it is there's something called a yen carry trade. And what it is basically hedge funds, sophisticated investors, they go to Japan, they form a relationship with the bank lends them money at basically 0 interest rates. So we have our interest rates set at 5.25. Japan, until very recently, had a negative 0.1% interest rate. Japan is everything we're heading to on steroids, right? Like, people talk about our debt to GDP at 120%. Japan's is over 200%. Yeah, it's out of control in Japan. People talk about our bank printing money. Well, the Federal Reserve holds about $8 trillion, which is about a quarter of our national debt. Japan, to compare it to GDP, the debt or the money that their central bank holds is approximately 100% of GDP. So it would be like if they'd have printed 4 or 5 times the amount of money that the United States has relative to their economy. So there's been central bank shenanigans going on in Japan for a long time. And people have been taking advantage of these ultra low interest rates. And they literally, on Wednesday, they raised their interest rate from 0.1% to 0.25%. And you might think, that's what caused this? And in a way it did. It happened on Wednesday, which was the same day that Jerome Powell came out and basically said, the Federal Reserve, we're going to probably start cutting rates. And so what happens is even though it's not a big move, there was a compression in that difference between the US yields and the Japanese yields. And that started a chain reaction where people realize, okay, I need to get out of these bets. And as one person gets out of these bets, because they're all levered bets, like 10, 15, 20 to 1, then other people have to get out. And because they're levered, even if they go down 5%, if you're levered 20 to 1, that's all of your money. So basically where these people have all their transactions, like prime brokers they're called, they also are holding other assets of these individuals or hedge funds or sophisticated entities. And when they get a margin call, they just sell what's in those accounts. They don't care what it is, Bitcoin, Nvidia, the stock market, everything just gets sold. It's a fire sale. Prices get completely dislocated from reality. And you get one of these, kind of crashes, which is what we saw. Now, most people are assuming this was just a massive unwind. The trade was much bigger than anybody realized because it's all in the shadow banking system. Yeah. Nobody knew that this was going to happen. It caught people by surprise. It's worked its way through the system, and now it's over. And that's kind of what the market take on everything is at this point in time. Yeah, and so just the really broad overview, just to step back, is I don't think this is like, okay, this is like the first salvo in the coming real collapse, which I've talked about before on your show. I think it's still a couple of years away. I think the big tell on when that real collapse happens is when, instead of people rushing into treasury bonds and the dollar strengthening, which it did against other currencies, not against the yen, but the dollar, people go into the dollar and the treasury for safety. When people stop doing that, that's going to be your sign that this is kind of the big one. This is where we're headed, for a real, reset, global calamity. Like this is it. I don't think that's what this is. I think that a bunch of things did coincide. It wasn't just this unwind of the carry trade. It was stuff like you mentioned, Warren Buffett selling half of his Apple position. But I have to admit, I think, again, these are people kind of reading too much into maybe something that's not really there. Warren Buffett's longtime partner, Charlie Munger, recently passed away. He was a big decision maker. He's now out of the picture. The amount that they held was like 40% of the value of Berkshire Hathaway, and that's just way too. Anybody that has 40% of their wealth in one company, you're going to think they're crazy.
Yeah.
And I think he was wanting to sell it actually ahead of possible tax increases. So essentially, he had a ton of profits, and he didn't want to be forced to sell this in 2025, 2026, when he's not going to know what the tax rules are. And so I think there's a lot of that stuff going on. But what is interesting is not so much the Apple sale as that, he's not deploying it anywhere. So he's holding $300 billion worth of treasury bills. And part of that is he's got so much money, it's hard to find good opportunities. But part of it is he's doing what I think, is a smart thing to do, is he's building up a cash pile for when the stuff really does hit the fan, he's going to have money to come in. And I do think that's a bit of a signal. But he's been holding a ton of cash for a long time, and he's just building it and building it. So I don't read too much into the Apple sale in particular, but his growth and holding of so much T-bills is definitely a sign that he's worried there could be something on the horizon. Yeah, it's called the Bitcoin Act, and it is an acronym. It stands for some crazy long, wording, but it's called the Bitcoin Act. It's a relatively short bill. It's 13 pages long, submitted by Senator Loomis, and this was kind of unveiled at that Bitcoin conference. So this has been obviously a big shift where Trump has embraced crypto. He went to the Bitcoin conference in Nashville a couple of weeks ago. He said some very bullish things about crypto. And then he was immediately followed by Senator Loomis, who's the senator from Wyoming, who's very involved. She calls herself the crypto senator. And she basically came out and announced she's going to create this bill to essentially buy billions and billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin and create a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which is very laughable because it's as if it's gold or oil. We're going to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Like, we're talking about a software protocol here, but basically what it is it's pandering to the crypto community on the one hand, but it's also got some more nefarious elements like in the bill itself. So if you go to Section 9 about how they're going to pay for this, they have a section in there that essentially is transferring any power to print money to the Federal Reserve, that the Federal Reserve now has, to the Treasury. So it's giving Yellen essentially unlimited money printing, unlimited quantitative easing, but it's obfuscated in this really weird language surrounding nuances of the way the United States holds its gold. So it might take a second to kind of explain, but this is all tied into our gold stockpiles and a bunch of weird accounting tricks that in the end essentially allow the Treasury to literally print trillions of dollars and not even have to go to the Federal Reserve to print money. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I think this bill is an example of who are people who believe in Bitcoin as an alternative to the monetary system that's controlled by the Federal Reserve and the United States government, and who are people who are just buying it or holding it because they're hoping somebody's going to come down the road in a few months or a few years and pay a lot more money for it. And I think a lot of the Bitcoin community, like, really was, clapping and going crazy for all this stuff. RFK said that he was going to buy even more Bitcoin, promised to buy 4 million Bitcoin. There's only 21 million to be created. So, 4 million, like 20% of the whole Bitcoin. Like, basically, even with the amount that this bill has, which is 1 million, it essentially will give the United States power over the price of Bitcoin, right? Wow. If they think the price is too high and they're holding all this Bitcoin, they can go into the market and sell it. If they think the price is too low, they can buy it back. This is a way to just totally take any autonomy that Bitcoin may have and place all the power in the hands of the government. And it has this added bonus, as I said, of giving a legal framework for the Treasury to print money instead of having to actually go through the charade of the Federal Reserve doing it. So to get into these details a little bit, like, as I said, there's 21 million total Bitcoin to be created. Most of those are already created. There's mining going on. It's going to create a few more in the coming years. But, to hold 1 million Bitcoin is approximately 5% of the total. Now, that might not sound like a ton, but when you control 5% of an asset, like I said, the prices get set on the margin. If someone had 5% of all of the world's dollars, let's say there's, a quadrillion dollars, somebody goes into the market that owns 5% of those and starts buying or selling them, they basically can control the price. And so what they want to do is, buy these Bitcoin and then supposedly put it into a reserve that they can't touch it for 20 years. And that's the way they're pitching this. It's going to be a reserve. But when you read the language, it says, but there's an exception. They can go and access it anytime they want, so long as they use it to pay off the debt. Well, if they take it and use it to pay off the debt and then they just turn around and issue more debt, it basically means they can go into the cookie jar at any time, buy, sell, control the price, like I said.
Wow.
So that's the first, just refutation of someone that says it's not so they can control the price, they can't sell it, it's for 20 years. No, it's not. The bill says they can access it anytime. And so that's one thing. The other thing is this section where it says how they're going to pay for it. So in the 1970s, when we went off the gold standard, the Treasury issued to the Federal Reserve what they called Federal Reserve gold certificates that priced gold at basically $40 an ounce, $42.22 an ounce. To be precise. But basically, this is in statute, and it says that the gold is worth $42 an ounce, and this is the way the Federal Reserve accounts for all of this gold. In this bill, what it says, so they're going to pay for this by the United States Treasury calling in these gold certificates that price gold at $42, and then the Treasury is going to issue a new gold certificate to the Federal Reserve at whatever price they say gold is worth. It could be 5,000, 100,000, and that within 90 days, the Federal Reserve has to send that amount of dollars, the difference, to the Treasury. So this is really kind of arcane stuff, but this is what this bill is saying. Basically, for example, right now it's at $42 on the books. They come in and say it's worth, let's say, $10,000. That difference between $42 an ounce and $10,000 an ounce on 260 million ounces is approximately $50 trillion. Okay, so that's why I'm saying this is unlimited money printing authority to the United States Treasury in the legal wording of this bill. He's big in all this. I mean, he's a kingpin in the deep economic state. I mean, he controls everything. You look at who owns the most shares of any stock. It's all Vanguard and BlackRock are number 1 and 2. They can trade. I mean, companies are owned by the shareholders. If the shareholder is BlackRock and Larry Fink is BlackRock, I mean, Larry Fink owns the corporate world. And I mean, this is that's not even like, hyperbole. That's just like a fact. Like, you can go to Yahoo Finance, go to Apple, largest holders. It's going to be Vanguard, BlackRock. And when you add Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street, the 3 largest owners of these stocks through these passive investment vehicles, ETFs or mutual funds, I mean, they control the companies. So you have the entire corporate apparatus of the United States is controlled by a handful of people. And they can, through these shareholder votes and annual meetings, they can decide who the board of directors are. And once they pick the board, then the board gets to pick the CEO. And so it's a daisy chain, but it's all there. Now, one last minor detail I just want to add in case anybody says, Mel, you said the Treasury can say any price they want. It says it needs to be the market price in the bill for Bitcoin. If you read the language carefully, it says market price at any date that the Treasury Secretary determines. Now, if this is supposed to be part of a strategic reserve, there's nothing to stop the Secretary of the Treasury from saying the date I'm putting on the certificate is when this reserve is supposed to, open up, like let's say 2060. And our Treasury estimate for the price of gold in 2060 is, $80,000 an ounce or something like that. And so since in the old statute, and this is part of the bill, it strikes out that $42 an ounce. In the old statute, the price was actually written out, the dollar price of gold. In this statute, it essentially gives it to the Treasury Secretary. So I just wanted to clarify that. Now, one last thing I'm thinking in BlackRock is this is part of the big problem with our system is they're doing everything they can to get every single American to put all their money into the stock market. Now they're going to be put it into crypto. They're wanting all of these assets, all of America's wealth, to go into these assets that they can then control, they can manipulate, they can scare the bejesus out of you if they cause a panic. They can cause a panic, which maybe that's part of the reason this all happened this week, so that now the Federal Reserve has the green light to really cut interest rates in September ahead of the election. Like you start seeing this inside baseball stuff of what they're doing. If they're going to control Bitcoin, if they're controlling the dollar, if they're controlling our assets and our stocks, they're controlling everything, then that's the whole ball of wax. And because people's retirements and their savings they're all being told, just go into the stock market, just put it in there, forget about it, don't even look at it. It's all in the long run. It's all just going to be a straight line up and to the right. Just because stocks went up and to the right between, let's call it the Great Depression and now, doesn't mean that's what's going to happen in the next 50 or 80 years. That's the number one rule of finance. Past performance does not indicate future results.
Especially now.
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy. It's crazy some of the stuff that they're advocating for, and this is a multi-decade shift that's just all coming to fruition when they destroyed the defined benefit plans and the pension plans that the free market system had retirement, nailed down, right? You go, you work, the company takes the money, they invest it, and then it's in a separate account, and this is your pension plan, and when you retire, and the government wasn't involved, and it was such a better system. Yeah. But the government didn't control it. Now the government controls it all. And by putting it in any money that you do invest into your 401ks, which they have restrictions on when you can access your money, or you can't take it out before this part without, it's just any aspect of our lives. It's a totalitarian takeover. They're just trying to take over everything. And people are letting it happen because, they're getting, they're worried about Taylor Swift, and they're happy playing video games. Yeah, it has. And I think, just really quick on, the biometrics. Yeah, all that stuff, they're already doing it, right? Sam Altman, the Chat GPT guy, he's got this thing called WorldCoin, where there are situated in different places around the world, these body biometric scanners. Like, he wants to get everybody on this and create this alternative monetary system. It's all based on biometrics that they then control. And I think when you look at the central bank digital currency, people caught on to it, and they're just doing an end run around having the Federal Reserve issue it. The same senator that did the Bitcoin Act a few months earlier, she proposed something called the Stablecoin Payments Bill. And that was a bill that basically required stablecoins, which are essentially like private currency, where they're backed by the U.S. Treasury or T-bills, and people can send them anywhere, do instant payments. She wanted to legitimize it, but part of that legitimization is requiring all these stablecoin companies to hold those T-bills that are backing the coins with Federal Reserve depository institutions, so that all this money goes right back in to the commercial banking system, and they don't get cut out of it. And they're going to get transaction data that way, so they can already get it through the credit card companies. What they were worried is that people are going to start using crypto and not have a way to track these things, control this. They're finding ways now to track, control crypto ergo, a CBDC is not as important as it once was. And so you had Powell asked about CBDCs in his last press conference last week. It was the last question. And, he kind of brushed it off like, well, we have people looking into it, but we have no plans for it. So they understand that, but they're just finding ways around it. And you mentioned the states. That's another interesting point I didn't even bring up about this Bitcoin bill. Is there's also a section in there that this amazing strategic reserve they're going to create with all these cold storage vaults is going to be open for the states to use to hold their crypto. So now, if North Carolina or New York or whoever says, you know what, we're going to hold some of our money in gold and we're going to hold some in Bitcoin because we want to be away from the dollar. Well, now the government's saying, well, just give us those keys and we'll control it. So it's a way to just totally monopolize control, no matter what people try to come up. And, like I said, I mean, this is a great differentiator between who's holding Bitcoin because they want an alternative monetary system and who's just holding it because they want to make money. All the people cheering for the Federal Reserve to start buying Bitcoin or the Treasury to buy it and it held in these vaults. I think that's the exact opposite of what it was created for. And in the long run, by the way, if it's truly going to evolve as an independent payment system, it needs to be independent. And all this does is it'll turn into a proxy for the dollar, basically. Yeah. Well, I mean, for people that remember the very beginning of the Matrix, and,
Exactly.
They explain what happened is AI got created. It basically took over. The humans thought if we release all our nuclear weapons, the AI won't have the power to run. And therefore, we'll have defeated AI, except AI turned people into batteries because AI needs power. So look, that's a metaphor, it's an analogy, but in a weird way, that's exactly what's happening, right?
Right.
Is the supplanting of human sovereignty with some sort of an AI-controlled totalitarian state. And you're absolutely correct to bring up the energy and the water, because these are water-cooled systems.
Right.
And when you look at, okay, they want us driving electric cars, then they want AI, which drains all this energy and water. And then they also want to be mining Bitcoin, which Bitcoin is mined by answering these complicated mathematical questions. It costs like $40,000, $50,000 to mine one Bitcoin because of all the energy drain in these data centers. This is just a 1, 2, 3 punch. It's crazy. It's out of control. Yeah, I mean, look, if you read the literature, the way that proposed global takeover of these neo-Marxist type, ideologies happens, is you have to absolutely destroy everything, right? So the dollar, money, these ones and zeros, those are illusions of things that matter. What matters is food, water, and energy. So when the whole money, illusion collapses, what's going to matter is who's got the control over the food, the water, and the energy. If they're securing that control, if they're arranging that in the area, then what they do is then they collapse the whole current world order, the nation state order, the dollar order. They collapse all of that. Then they come in with the control of all the resources, and then they put in their one world totalitarian government with, granular, transactional control of absolutely everything. And then they have their dream for their new utopian society. And they're doing it not even behind the scenes. They're doing it right out in the open. You just have to, read through a boring bill or look a little closer at what they're doing. People are already seeing this in states where their electric bills are getting jacked up because of all of these data centers. And you're going to start hearing more about climate change causing droughts, and therefore people aren't going to be able to use water. And it's going to be because they're water cooling, AI data centers and all this other, and Bitcoin mining. So all this stuff, it really is happening. It's almost hard to believe because you think, is this really happening to us?
I know.
But it is. I mean, look at it. We've got a person running for president, never won a primary. I mean, they were put there in backroom deals.
Right.
I mean, they're doing it to us. They're doing it right in front of our eyes. They're taking away our democracy. They're taking away our freedom. And they're preparing to do it on an even much larger scale. So gold has been in this range. It had that really big move up earlier this year to 2,500 range. And it's been hanging right around that range for a while. This is a typical thing you see with assets. It's like a basing pattern. It's a consolidation. Something goes up a lot. A lot of times it comes down. It hasn't gone down. Like it didn't retrace half of that move. It didn't drop $300 an ounce or something like that. to me, that's gold's strength. That the gold market's probably, as it always usually is, it's being manipulated.
Right.
And then what was really interesting is while all these other assets are going crazy, treasuries, stocks, right? Gold's just there, going up a few dollars, $10, $15, down 10, 15, still at that $2,400, $2,500 range. I think gold is just waiting to just really break out, to just take a whole nother big leg up. From that 2,500 to that 3,000, breakthrough 3,000. I don't know when that's going to happen, if it's next week, next month, in January. I think it's soon. I think it's in the next, let's call it 3 to 9 months. We're going to see another really big move in gold. And the interesting thing is when this whole yen carry unwinds, people need to sell whatever they can. And that's why every asset goes down. The correlations go to 1. Gold didn't go down. Right. So for just gold to stay in that $2,400, $2,500 range while all this craziness, that's a sign in itself that this is just really, it's the best asset out there. It's where you want to be. It's why I wasn't getting all worried when, the stock market was going down. I was sitting there on Sunday night saying, I'm going to play for a short-term bounce and I'm going to buy stuff on Monday morning and sell. I sold most of my stuff yesterday and today. And, it's easy to say, but if people want to follow me at Mel Mattison 1 on Sunday night, I was tweeting out like, buy. And I actually said buy the stock market and Bitcoin. Why? Because I love Bitcoin? No, because I knew these movements were going to get, they were overdone. They were going to get bought. There was going to be an easy move. I'm buying Bitcoin, 52,000, 49,000, 53,000. And then I'm selling it yesterday and today. My high sale today was over 56,000. You're making, 10, 15% on these moves. Now, what's going to happen tomorrow? I don't know. Is the carry unwind completely done? This was just a short-term opportunity I took advantage of. But I was able to do that because most of my money is not in the stock market controlled by Larry Fink and Vanguard and BlackRock. It's mostly in land, real estate, gold, and silver. But I do have a pool that I speculate with in the stock market. And if I need money to buy something because stuff gets really cheap, like Warren Buffett's got these treasury bills, I also have money in some treasury bills that, significant amount, not like 5% of my, like 20% in treasury bills. 30, 40% in gold and silver, the rest in land. And then, you've got a 10, 15% for the stock market because the stock market it's not a fair marketplace to value companies. It has nothing to do with future cash flows and stuff that I learned in business school. It's all a stock market game by the bankers and a rig control. You can play it if you want to, but I wouldn't put the majority of my wealth into the stock market. No way. Yeah, I mean, there are a few rays of sunlight out there in the world. I think one of them is that, the kind of Gen Zs and Gen Alphas, even the next one, their instincts, their guts are telling them, that there's something wrong, right? They're intuitively understanding a lot of stuff that for older people, it kind of took like an unbrainwashing to kind of figure it out. But they're figuring it out. Like they're not thinking that my Social Security is going to be there when I retire, or they're understanding that there's a lot of these shenanigans going in the stock market and what's happening with it. And if there's one kind of side benefit of the crypto thing, is the crypto thing did put out a lot of education about the fiat money system and the Federal Reserve. And so people are looking at that and they're saying, okay, I have some money in Bitcoin, or maybe I can't afford to buy any real amount of Bitcoin. But there's also gold does the same thing. I think gold is what Bitcoin wants to be when it grows up. I don't know what the ultimate fate of Bitcoin is going to be, but it's not gold. When the market was selling off, what was dropping? Nvidia, stocks, Bitcoin, right? It's a risk asset. It's not gold. What was holding in there like a rock? Gold. When we start seeing Bitcoin moving exactly the way gold does, then maybe it's digital gold. But it's not digital gold at this point in time. I think that's the hope. But then again, we don't even know who's behind Bitcoin. Is it the NSA? Again, this is why it's a speculative instrument to me that is not gold. Gold is, you hold it. It's not a software protocol. It's a physical metal. and it's something that has stood the test of time. It has literally thousands of years of history, not 12 years. I literally have pairs of socks that are older than the creation of Bitcoin. I mean,
true.
you want to put your wealth in this software protocol that was created like 15 years ago, and that's where you're going to, that Bitcoin conference, I listened to some of the speeches. I mean, you had this guy, Michael Saylor, out there talking about how if you really want to make money, you need to mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin. This was how he said. And he said, if governments really want to make money, they need to take all of their money and put it like. His whole thing was like, and it was predicting by 2040 that Bitcoin is going to be at like $40-50 million a Bitcoin. And if the government just starts buying Bitcoin, we're going to pay off all of our national debt. And I mean, this was a speech. It was called Michael Saylor. I was listening to the Bitcoin people
I'm gonna
afterwards.
go listen to it. That sounds crazy.
You people really should listen so they understand the mindset.
Right.
These people think that Bitcoin is going to save the world. And I know there could be some Bitcoin people who are hating on me. What I'm saying is the idea is good. It's not proven yet. We don't really know who's behind it. I'm not putting you down. And yes, you've made a lot of money if you invested early in it.
Right.
That's all true, right? It's all true. But what I'm saying is, as a basis for the future of the whole world's economy and monetary system, it's not proven itself yet that it's there. But these people are all assuming that that's just a foregone conclusion. Bitcoin's going to the moon. That was a phrase Trump used. If Bitcoin goes to the moon, the United States is going to own it. And I mean, I think Trump, to be honest, I think he's doing some things that he feels he needs to do to make sure that he doesn't lose this time like he did in 2020. He felt he got beat last time because tech billionaires were flooding the ballot boxes with mail-in ballots, and he's saying, look, and he didn't say the United States was going to create a Bitcoin reserve. The one promise he made in the conference was that the United States is not going to sell the 200,000 Bitcoin it owns because of confiscations. It was then Senator Loomis who came out and said all this stuff about the reserve. So I think some of the stuff, I think there's not a coincidence that, after he picked JD Vance, Elon and the PayPal mafias, sending 45 million. I don't know. My hunch is that he's making some deals with the devil right now because he wants to get in there. And you have to be careful making deals with the devil. But I think he's saying if I lose because I don't make these deals, then I can't help this country. But if I make deals, once I get in, I'll be able to do what I need to do. And if these guys are going to think that they're going to own me because they gave me 45 million to help with a mailing campaign, then they're wrong. And we'll see what happens. That's my 2 cents on that. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're right. I think when the dollar was weaponized and people started, talking about this more, like by that point, actually, it was already a fait accompli that these people were leaving the dollar system. If you look at IMF data on when did these other global central banks start reducing their treasury holdings and buying gold, it was like 25 years ago when they started doing it. And it really picked up after the financial crisis. I think this move to move away from the dollar as the global system really began in earnest by the BRICS countries after 2009. When they saw what being a part of that system got them. And so this is just accelerating now, and it's happening. What the geopolitical, big strategic plan is, I mean, it's a little bit of a longer conversation, but I mean, look, the United States is in a very unique position because we are the only country in the world that actually has the innovation and technological superiority, that lives in a country that has all the resources we need. That has the Great Lakes, that has the farm. Nobody else has it. Europe that has the oil. We have this ability. I have this view, generally speaking, that if we just start saying to the world, you don't want us on the global stage, fine, we exit stage right.
I agree.
They'll be begging us to come back in and want to work with us in fair ways. The problem really, I think, is that these people at the top they're the Larry Finks of the world. They don't want that to happen because then they lose their empires and these global systems they're building. America, in my ideal world, would go back to, George Washington's speech that he submitted at the end of his term, where he talked about let no nation be a friend or foe of the United States, right? No country. I don't understand this. We have friends. We are countries. We're not people. I have friends. The United States shouldn't have any friends.
Right.
We're a nation state. We should act in the best long-term interest of the United States
Right.
at all times, regardless of what that means. It doesn't mean that, now there are times when you want to help somebody out because you're
Sure.
going to need a favor down the road. And maybe this particular action isn't in the U.S. best interest, but the long-term strategic. And so it's a complicated thing. It's not as simple as black and white. But I do think that, like, the rest of the world, in a way, is scared to death of us because we don't need them; they need us.
And yet, and yet we're
we don't think
projecting
that.
weakness.
Yeah, well, I mean, you did mention like gold it gets a bad rap because there's a propaganda machine against it, right?
Right.
I mean, look, I told you the book value of gold is $42 an ounce because that's what it was, but what do you mean gold doesn't? Look, gold holds value, but gold can also do more than just hold value when it's coming out of a period where its price has been artificially suppressed.
Right.
So for decades, we have had central banks in the West, like the Bank of England, selling huge amounts of gold year after year into the market. Now we have these BRICS central banks buying huge amounts.
Right.
Like, the price has been artificially suppressed for a long time. So it's not just got that store of value capability, it's got the ability to truly appreciate in like a skyrocketing fashion. Now I can't guarantee any of that or when that's going to happen. But so what I have been doing myself is every month or quarter when the market gets like really frothy or really high, I sell some of those positions I have in like speculative stuff or some longer term stock holdings, and I move more of that into gold and then also some treasury bills. So I'm taking my exposure to that stock market casino lower while still having some of that at play to capture some of these gains because I think they're blowing up a bubble that I think is going to crash still 2-3 years away. And so I think people that maybe have bought into this, well, I'm just going to put every dollar of my savings into my 401k and put it into an index fund and never look at it. I think they should consider, like, is that really what you want to do? And you don't have to start right away and sell all your stocks and put it all into gold. But maybe start, learn how it is, get comfortable with it. Say, you know what, I'm going to sell 2%. Let's say I had 200 grand. I'm going to sell 4 grand in my 401k in cash. And I'm going to put it into an IRA with a trusted partner, or I'm going to buy, you can't buy physical with it if it's in an IRA for tax reasons, but if you have a non-IRA account, I'm going to buy some physical gold and deposit it somewhere safe deposit box, a hole in the backyard, and who knows, whatever makes you feel comfortable. But, these are things that I think people should start doing if they're not already. If they're already doing these sort of things, great. And then the last thing to just add is I'm with you, like, to really change these things, it's actually going to be a long fight. It's going to take time. There's not a quick, sexy way to fix it. It's about changing local government. It's about campaigns to do things like fire these boards of state universities and put in people that actually have diverse thought opinions instead of just diverse racial backgrounds. And, so that the professors can't become 98% leftist Marxists teaching the youth of our country. Like, we need to start changing the institute. We need to start doing what they were doing to us, which is, infiltrating institutions and changing them and doing this, clandestine takeover. And we do it on a state and a local level, and we do it in our institutions and with our education system, and we start reversing the tide. And I think some of that's starting, but it needs to continue. Yeah, sure. I mean, the tagline I use is it's like quantum AI, the blockchain, and corrupt central bankers collide in the stock market supernova, which, I don't know, it kind of sounds a little bit of what we're starting to see, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Bankers, AI.
It's getting more less fictiony and more.
Yeah, it's getting less fictiony, and there's a reason for that. That was definitely behind it. So it's a fiction. It's a good read. It's available wherever books are sold. There's audiobook, paperback, however you like to read. And it just takes these themes, puts it into a fictional narrative, and it kind of educates as well as entertains, I hope. And so if people are interested in it, check it out. Just search Quaz, financial thriller, or check out my website, melmattison.com, or follow me at Mel Mattison1 on Twitter or whatever. And, I'd appreciate any interest people have. If they love thrillers and they're into this type of stuff, I think they'll really enjoy Quaz.